Now that you've become familiar with what scholarly articles are, let's talk about some of the basic differences between scholarly and non-scholarly sources. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about scholarly sources, i.e. journal articles, because you've just read about them. But in brief summary, we know scholarly journal articles are based on original research or analysis, authored by scholars or experts for other experts. They include citations for all sources used, and they may be peer-reviewed. Non-scholarly sources are the sources that we're typically all quite familiar with. We encounter them in our daily lives, and they can include things such as news sources, magazines, and general web reference websites with topical entries. They can be authored by anyone, you, me, my neighbor, your Uncle Bob. We can all be authors, and we don't necessarily have to have any special training or expertise on the topic we're writing about or reporting on. They're intended for a general audience, which means they tend to be more accessible in terms of vocabulary, language, and syntax, and they also tend to be more widely distributed and easier to get your hands on. We do need to be aware that non-scholarly sources can be commercial in nature. You might come across a source that's on a website that is actually trying to sell you a product or a service, and so the information that's contained on that site might not always be entirely accurate, as the sponsors of the website have a vested interest in convincing you to purchase their product or their service. Non-scholarly sources may also be sponsored by special interest groups, such as political action committees, and these groups might be trying to persuade you to vote a certain way on an issue like immigration or healthcare, and very likely the source will have some sort of a bias, and that is something that you want to steer clear of. Non-scholarly sources may or may not include citations. This is also problematic, as they might contain questionable bits of information or even pieces of data that where the sources are not cited, and you're going to want to steer clear of that type of information as well, as it may be unreliable. They may actually be good for learning about a topic. In fact, they are really good for learning about basic baseline knowledge on a particular topic. You'll even have instructors who will specifically ask you to look at non-scholarly sources for an assignment, though they will typically ask you to look for higher quality sources. Let's look at some examples of these two different types of sources. These are the covers of various scholarly journals, which are composed primarily of scholarly articles. You'll notice they tend to be very focused on a particular field of study, and if we were to take a closer look, we would see that they're published by universities and professional organizations, and their primary mission is to disseminate scholarly research. Let's look at some examples of non-scholarly sources. They typically exist for general interest or to inform or entertain the public, but they may also exist for commercial profit. Types of non-scholarly sources include newspapers, magazines, trade publications, general reference websites, and blogs, among others. Some specific examples include the New York Times, Sports Illustrated, or the New Yorker magazine. Wikipedia is another example of a general reference website, along with WebMD. And we also have news networks like NPR or BBC News.